Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's sort of sports related, but not at the same time. But as a Calgary sports fan, and specifically Calgary Stampeders sports fan, I do occasionally like to travel to catch my Calgary Stampeders on the road. And in this video, I'm going to talk about two bus services and compare the two bus services that I used recently in 2021 for my football trips. First would be the Red Arrow, which I used that Red Arrow to go from here to Edmonton for the Labour Day Rematch trip. And then the second bus service that I'm going to talk about is I took the Rider Express. Kind of loosely say Rider Express, play on words, as I used that service to get from here to Regina. However, I had to go up to Edmonton first to change to go to Regina. Maybe I'll throw in a little hint what I would like Rider Express to do in the future, let's say maybe in 2022 for the Grey Cup. But this is what I'll talk about and give you my feedback on my experiences on bus services that I used to go on my football trips, especially now that Greyhound is out of Canada. Greyhound is no longer available in Canada. In fact, it was Western Canada, middle of 2018, that they pulled out of Western Canada, and then when COVID happened, they stopped running altogether when they were only in Southern Ontario and Quebec. But then Greyhound, the Canadian part, said that they weren't going to continue at all once things loosened up travel-wise. So this video could be helpful for anyone who is trying to find alternative bus services. So let's get into the first service called the Red Arrow. And this was not the first time that I used the Red Arrow for the Labour Day Rematch this past year. I actually used the Red Arrow to go to the 106th Grey Cup in 2018 when actually my Calgary Stampeders won the Grey Cup. And the reason why then I picked the Red Arrow was, well, if the Grey Cup's in late November, I'm going to spend 5 days up in Edmonton and don't know what the weather's going to be like as a fair weather driver. Plus, I figured once I get to the Grey Cup Festival and the game, that I wasn't going to do too much driving once I was there, especially if I'm going to have a few adult beverages. But I took the Red Arrow then, and I took it this year, and I'm going to say it's definitely well worth the price of admission or price to use the service. It is a lot more expensive than when it comes to, let's say, Greyhound, the Rider Express, or the same company that the Red Arrow operates is called the eBus, which is kind of a stripped down version. But the Red Arrow is actually kind of a luxury business class motorcoach, as I would say, because the beauty of Red Arrow is, I mean, basically it serves as the corridor of Alberta, and basically it, goes from Fort Murray down to Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary, and Lethbridge. And I actually did see when I went to Dawson Creek a few years ago for my summer holiday, I actually saw a Red Arrow bus up in Grand Prairie. I'm not too sure if it's changed now because of COVID. I mean, services have been reduced because of it, but it's slowly picking up. But Red Arrow has been an Alberta-based company for over 40 years. It definitely serves the business crowd, business clientele, mostly, because there's several buses that run during the day, most days of the week. I actually first heard of Red Arrow, actually where the office is in Calgary, which is near the Theatre Arts, the Glenmore Museum. I used to work in a company that its office was near there, and sometimes we have partners that come from Edmonton, because we had an office in Edmonton that they come down to Calgary, and that's how they use it to get to and from Calgary. But it was $75 one way. I leave $75 to $80 because I remember my whole trip after taxes and that for the round trip from Calgary to Edmonton, it was about $160. for going up to Edmonton just the weekend. And then I say during the pandemic, where car rental prices are way more expensive, I definitely figure that going forward, now just for quick weekend trips up to Edmonton, I think I am going to take the Red Arrow because it costs just as much for renting a car and gas, especially how much gas prices cost. But with the Red Arrow, as I say, it's luxury, kind of first class airline, but I feel you have more room on the bus than you do on a plane. They got one side of the bus that's just single row, and the other side you got 2 seats and you get your own armrests. And then, it's a leather seat. You get movies, entertainment on the bus, and you have snacks with pop, or we call it pop up here in Canada, or coffee, just snacks and the washroom on board. I'm going to say, if you're just staying in Alberta, going up the corridor, and you have a few more dollars to spend, I would definitely say the Red Arrow is worth it. And of course, Wi-Fi, you could theoretically do work while I'm on the bus if you're, business on the go. Depending if it works or not, that's always hit or miss when it comes to bus, but I'm going to say if you don't want to drive, or, the amount of money, time it would spend to get downtown to downtown on the Red Arrow, would probably be just as fast or faster than flying, especially, going through security, going through all the stuff you need to in the airport, and the fact that the Edmonton International Airport is in the Duke and Nisku, where you're still a half an hour, 45-minute car ride away from getting into the city. That case, it makes sense to take the bus. So I definitely would recommend the Red Arrow, or if it's the same company, and if you don't have as much money to spend, but you don't get and the seating is assigned. It's not open seating free for all like on a regular bus. eBus is, but if you have the money to spend, it's well worth Red Arrow, but it only operates in Alberta. And then they've operated in Alberta for over 40 years, and that's probably why they've been able to stay in business as long as they can, because it is a step up from Greyhound or any other traditional bus service. They have the eBus for if you're really frugal. And apparently I understand that the eBus has started filling up some gaps in British Columbia, especially in the major corridor. But that's my experience with the Red Arrow. So what do you think of the Red Arrow if you've used the Red Arrow before? I'll put both links to the description below, both bus companies that I've used this year and give you my review on. I'm not getting paid, this is just my genuine review, but Red Arrow, definitely top notch, I would say, if you got the money to spend. So now let's move on to the Rider Express. As I used the Rider Express when I went to Regina, Saskatchewan on Thanksgiving weekend to catch the Calgary Stampeders on the road in Regina. And ultimately, round trip for that cost me $300. But keep in mind, it's a much, much longer journey from here to Regina than it is from here to Edmonton. However, the thing with the Rider Express is that you're stripped down to Greyhound-ish quality. If Greyhound-ish is a word, I'm making it a word for the sake of this video, where it's a clean, modern bus. It holds more people compared to the Red Arrow, but it's open seating. So you do not get snacks on board. You don't have the entertainment. You got to bring your own entertainment, and Wi-Fi is hit or miss, which is always the case when you're traveling. But it's a standard, motor coach that holds, I think, 55 passengers in the Prevost. But the case with the Rider Express is that here in Calgary, you have 2 spots you can come to catch the bus, either at Marlborough Mall in Northeast Calgary, near where I used to live, or Westbrook Mall, which is where I caught the bus. But the thing with this trip, though, the fact that I was coming from here to Regina, unfortunately, the Rider Express, the only complaint that I've had the time I used it, is you don't have a bus that goes from here to Regina. So I had to go up to Edmonton to change buses, then to go from Edmonton to Regina and back. So ultimately, it was a 14-hour day. To put it in perspective, when I went to use Red Arrow, and actually the option that I had for Red Arrow, leaving Friday evening, like 4:30, to go to Edmonton, it was just the express, but then going back, leaving Edmonton at noon to come to Calgary. Just after 4, it required a stop in Red Deer, and then going to Calgary at the airport and the other offices in Calgary. But the thing of the Rider Express was the fact that I had to go up to Edmonton to change, which that is what was the case. And the fact that I left Friday afternoon to go to Edmonton, I came home Monday afternoon. This Regina trip, I left Friday morning to eventually get to Regina Friday night, and I came home as I had to get up early Sunday morning to come home to Calgary Sunday night. But I was trying to make the trip economical. But it was leaving Calgary at 7:30 to get up to Edmonton for about 11:30 in the morning to change buses. Because how it works is that you have dedicated stops, that they don't have like a terminal like Greyhound. Because I remember the Rider Express, like I said, Marble Mall or Westbrook Mall. And I know when I was at Westbrook Mall, there was actually people that rode the bus from Vancouver to Calgary overnight that stopped at Westbrook to eventually take that bus. So there was a lot of people that changed buses to connect. And I think there was one person on the bus for the Rider Express that started in Vancouver and was on that line that was going into Saskatchewan. But where I changed buses in Edmonton was the Edmonton Conference Inn. So that's what made the day longer. And then on that Friday, it was definitely a fuller bus because it was Thanksgiving weekend. It was full when it was in Saskatoon going to Regina. But as I say, the Rider Express is Greyhound-ish, where you just get the bus, scheduled breaks. There's no snacks on the board. And there's, washroom, but no snacks, no bigger leather seats. And the fact that, it's not assigned, so you have to be stuck with someone. But just be a decent person and let someone sit beside you, which is what happened on the Friday trip. Going back on Sunday, leaving Regina to go to Edmonton and eventually Calgary, the bus was only half full, so I was able to move around in the bus and take pictures. And also the fact that it was daylight for most of the way, but round trip, it was $300 for me to take the Rider Express for a much longer journey. But the only thing I would say to Rider Express is, I hope eventually, maybe there was, but then COVID happened and you got to cut costs. I hope eventually there'll be a Calgary to Regina leg that services the Highway 1, where it goes through Brooks, Medicine Hat, Swift Current, Moose Jaw, Regina. Because the Rider Express, I would definitely use that service to go to Regina for the Grey Cup in 2022. If I'm able to find a hotel room, that is. Because flights are too expensive as it is. And I've decided for all West Grey Cups, Red Arrow, if I'm just going up to Edmonton, or the Rider Express, I have my West Grey Cups covered. That I'm able to go to Vancouver, go to Regina. Hopefully in the future, when things maybe get back to normal, I can go from here to Regina and not have to change up in Edmonton. This case, I'm not riding on the city of Edmonton. It's the fact that I have to go up to Edmonton to change a bus to eventually go to Regina, which made my day much longer. And in fact, there were some people on that bus going to Regina that there was only an overnight bus from Regina to Winnipeg. So it is possible, but it's kind of filling in the gaps. It's not as frequent as Greyhound was. It still fills in some gaps in the major cities. There's still some holes when it comes to if you're in the absolute rural communities. And my understanding that the Rider Express is filling in, there used to be an STC, the Saskatchewan Transport Company, which is kind of a provincially funded bus service that they found it was no longer feasible in the province of Saskatchewan, that it's kind of filling in the gaps, but it's still not perfect. But at least when it comes to me going to do my football trips, I think Red Arrow, I'm always going to use the Red Arrow now, going on Labour Day Rematch trips going forward, because I think the cost for taking the bus would be about the same as for me to rent a car. I mean, I started to see car rental prices going back to where they were a couple years ago. I mean, this year, how much car rentals were, and if I was going to go anywhere and to make my trip as economical as possible, I took the bus. I took the Red Arrow, and then the Rider Express. First time I used it, it did the job. I mean, it got me, to and from Regina, no problems. I was able to make connections. I mean, the timing looks close, but there was enough people on both times where I was going to Edmonton that people were going on that bus that I was, and then there was people going on the Regina to Edmonton bus that was also going on the Calgary bus. So it's just basically, pay attention to where your stops are and follow your itinerary. I was able to use the service. I definitely would use it again if the need arises. Let's say Grey Cup next year. All I ask for the Rider Express is hopefully you have a Calgary to Regina leg. It'd be nice to not have to go to Edmonton. And it's not because of random, say, just because if you were driving to Regina from Calgary, you're probably not going to Edmonton first and then drive to 16 to Saskatoon and then the 11 down to Regina. I thought it was nice to see Saskatoon again, and I have to go back again sometime, but that's just my service reviews on both buses. If you have the money to spend, and if you're staying in Alberta, I definitely recommend the Red Arrow or Rider Express. It seems to slowly fill in the gaps, trying to make its way in the market, especially in Western Canada. I think they're slowly looking to go out to Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa. But I think right now you have to fill in some other bus services in between. But I think there is still plans that they're going to try to go across the country. I mean, there's still gaps you have to figure out. Let's say if you want to go to the smaller rural communities that Greyhound used to offer, but at least in the big cities, you'll have bus options. You still have a give or take and sacrifice, just like with anything, to make everything economical. So yeah, just my talking about both bus services, the Red Arrow and the Rider Express. Touched on the eBus, because the eBus is associated with the Red Arrow. But if you used those bus services in the past, what did you thought of those experience? And would you use it again? I definitely would use it again, just because I think after this year, especially the pandemic, and just being anxious to go anywhere, it's going to be a hybrid where I guess I will still, assuming car rental prices ever get back to where they were a few years ago, I would still rather drive under or optimal conditions. But there's definitely times where taking the bus will be more practical, even if it's much longer, but it's a different way to travel. So anyways, like I say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fans' journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, where I recap games and stories, but in this case, I shared my experience of how I was able to catch a couple Stampeder games on the road in Edmonton and Regina, taking the bus to keep it as economical as possible. But I also do a variety of non-sports content, birds, vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience from on the road. Or at a sport event, let's say when I caught the Stampeders up on the road, and after the Labour Day Rematch, where I was in Regina, in very hostile territory. So if that all sounds like be interesting to watch, to follow along this Calgary sports fans' journey, you know what you do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below, as well as the bus companies to look them up, Rider Express and Red Arrow. And I've done some vlogging to go on the side as well. That's just hit or miss, given where I have content made here and there. And I do have my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I put my short form content on that channel. So I appreciate like, subscribe here on my main channel and my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts. So I would say happy bus riding if you decide to use the Red Arrow, Rider Express, whatever you so choose to use. It definitely sucks that we don't have Greyhound anymore in Canada, but it seems like there's more competition out there, and I would say if there's more luxury Red Arrow-ish is a word for the purposes of this video, they have to go across the country, I would be willing to spend a little more money on that if anyone comes up that's feasible. But those are the services that I'll use in the meantime if taking the bus is how I'm going to get around. So I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, and go Stamps go. I got to throw that in there, so thank you.